BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, it's Anna Hill here with the Farming Today podcast. Today, as the government publishes its proposals for green energy infrastructure and 1.5 million new homes, what will it mean for rural communities?
One of the things the government risk is car-dependent estates at the edge of our towns and cities that won't necessarily address the housing crisis because affordable homes get squeezed out of the equation on the grounds of viability.
We'll have more on that in just a moment. First, though, all week we're taking a detailed look at the work of agricultural contractors. The majority of farms rely on these specialists to carry out particular work on their land, like cutting silage, spreading fertiliser and sorting out drainage. They can also bring with them specialist kit, like agricultural drones. Marie Lennon has been to meet Steve Frost, who runs SAS Land Services from Berkshire. He's licensed and approved to fly a drone for spreading, spraying and seeding on farms.
Obstacle avoidance enabled.
It's always telling you what it's doing. If it sees a tree or an obstacle in the field, it will stop. All very talkative.
This is like the console that you're holding. And this is essentially your controller, so you can get this bit of kit up in the air.
Yeah, so this controller has all the settings for the aircraft on it. You can put all of your variable rate maps or your boundary maps and things into the controller, and it will use the GPS off the controller and the GPS off the aircraft to know where everything is.
And tell me about the aircraft that we're looking at.
And it will take off fully loaded at 103 kilos. It's just on 3 metres square with a metre or so of props on each one, so obviously quite a big bit of kit there. We're off today to do granular fertiliser, but you can put seed, you can put powders and things like that. So basically, if you can spread it through a tractor spreader, you can spread it through this, exactly the same. So, okay, right, if we
Stand back.
Fasten all arm locks securely to prevent potential safety risks.
we'll go straight up.
Preparing to take off. Stand back at a safe distance. Aircraft on ground.
Off it goes. Wow, you could feel the power of the propellers.
A lot of wind comes off of there.
It's bringing back memories of playing Nintendo when I was a kid.
I bet. That's all it is, really. It's just bigger toys. I sort of started off, obviously grew up here on the family farm, started off ag contracting when I was 19, but as time went on and houses took over the farmland, it sort of pushed us more away from that and into commercial work. So this was my sort of get back into agriculture now, and obviously because we can pop it in a trailer, we can travel further afield. This has allowed us to get back onto the farm and back out there into the big acres, doing what we enjoy really. So.
Yeah, and where do you go? How does it work?
The main sort of summer work was putting turnips into standing cereal crops. A lot of cover crops went in. As the weather got wetter, we ended up sort of moving further down into the dairy areas of the country, down to the southwest. We were popping seeds into maize stubbles where they were too wet to actually travel with tractors anymore.
And you went through a 9-month process to get the licence to be able to fly this aircraft. What are the limitations? What are the restrictions in place to make sure that you're able to do this safely and responsibly?
Currently, we can't do anything with chemicals. If it's got a registered map number, we can't yet apply it.
Is that coming, though? Is that the future?
It should be, yes. I know the HSE are working on it. I think at the moment, their main concern is anything being applied by the air. Is it going to drift too far? Is it going to damage next door's crops or the neighbour's house?
There will be some people that will have questions about the safety of this, because as you say, it's a very heavy piece of machinery that's flying across rural areas. Is it safe?
It's got 2 radar systems on there, one which looks 360 degrees around the machine as it flies, one which looks behind it and follows the ground. And then it's got a set of vision cameras as well, so it can actually see where it's going. And if it flies towards a post or a tree, it will actually find a way around it, and it will bypass that and make sure it doesn't hit anything.
Very clever indeed. Steve Frost there in Berkshire. The government has published its Planning and Infrastructure Bill, which promises to unleash seismic reforms and bring about the biggest building boom in a generation. delivering 1.5 million new homes and developing green energy infrastructure across the countryside. The aim is to speed up planning decisions, but some landowners are worried the changes could mean a slew of compulsory purchase orders by public bodies, something that's being made easier in the bill. Ben Chu from BBC Verify has the details.
One of the biggest impacts of the new planning and infrastructure bill on rural communities in England and Wales seems likely to be the reforms to compulsory purchase. This is where the state has the power to acquire land without the consent of the owner. The new bill would make it easier for local authorities and bodies like the NHS and Homes England to compulsorily acquire agricultural land for a lower price than it might otherwise receive in future to build new schools, hospitals and affordable housing on it. The government argues this should speed up the delivery of this kind of vital public infrastructure, and it could benefit some in rural communities. A shortage of affordable housing is a particular problem in the countryside, where only 9% of homes are classified as affordable, less than half the rate in cities. But some landowners are worried. The bill would make it easier for state bodies to remove so-called hope value from the assessment of the compensation they need to pay for fields they acquire through compulsory purchase. This refers to the monetary value of a piece of land if it were to be granted planning permission in the future. Planning permission, particularly for housing, can vastly increase the value of agricultural land. It should be noted the previous Conservative government had already introduced reforms to the compulsory purchase order process in 2023 to make it easier to remove hope value from compensation payments. The new bill will extend those powers further, in line with Labour's 2024 election manifesto.
Ben Chu from BBC Verify. Well, as we've mentioned, some landowners are concerned that under the new bill, any land bought under a compulsory order would not include a hope valuation. Victoria Vivian is Chief Executive of the CLA in England and Wales, which represents landowners.
By asking the landowner to only take the agricultural value, potentially, of their land, they are saying that they are the people who should pay for effectively the inadequacies and inefficiencies that have left us with a housing crisis. For the most part, our members have been struggling to bring projects forward, and they've been met with the lethargy and hostility of the planning system. So I don't see an inertia in bringing houses forward. I think the real problem still resides in the planning system itself, which makes it so difficult and so expensive to bring forward projects.
Although you could say, couldn't you, look, there's the farmer, they want to sell the land, the council want to buy the land, maybe to put housing on it. But if the price is so high because the hope value has pushed that price up, then the council can't afford to do that anyway. Doesn't that make affordable housing less likely?
Well, affordable housing is largely the responsibility of the developer. If I felt that the developers were taking an equal hit on of this, I dare say we'd all feel a bit more positive about it. But it feels like everybody's saying, oh, the people who are making money out of this are the landowners and farmers, and the poor developers, strapped for cash as they always are. But our experience is that they start from their profit margin and work back. And they are not going to sacrifice any part of their profit margin. And so we're being asked to make that sacrifice and they aren't.
Let's move on to new energy infrastructure. There are plans to give people living near new pylons money off their bills. Do you think that'll make a difference?
Well, first of all, I'd like to know who's going to pay that money. It's going to be a massive cost. We're told that pylons, in particular, are being used instead of underground infrastructure because they're cheaper. That doesn't seem like a great argument to me if you then offer everybody who's within 5 miles of the pylons 250 quid off their bill. Why not take on board the early expense and push all of that infrastructure underground, and then we can carry on farming the ground on top of it?
Victoria Vivian from Country Land and Business Association. Conservation groups have welcomed the new bill's commitment to green energy, but they also worry whether wildlife will be fully protected in a countryside where so much development is taking place. Roger Mortlock is Chief Executive of CPRE, the countryside charity. He told me the 1.5 million new homes may still fail to fix the housing crisis, which he says is caused by a lack of affordable housing.
There's been a lot of talk about, that the planning system's responsible for all ills in the world in this one, but actually transforming the market for us is as critical through this bill for the government to diversify that market. As we've got a market that's got a stranglehold from 6 or 7 big players. And one of the things we'd like to see is, I think we know it from rural communities that, it's going to be small numbers of homes that are affordable and homes for social rent at the edge of villages and small towns that are going to make a real difference. And at the moment, they're just not viable for big developers to take forward.
Do you think the bill addresses those concerns at all?
I think there's not quite enough to power a diversification of the market at that scale. One of the things I think that the government risk is car-dependent estates at the edge of our towns and cities that we're all already very familiar with, that won't necessarily address the housing crisis because affordable homes get squeezed out of the equation on the grounds of viability.
Let's turn to green energy infrastructure. Now, the impact of pylons and solar farms on people living in rural areas, they often see that is immediate and long term. What do you say to your members who are complaining about those sorts of developments?
One of the things to start with is, we need to upgrade our grid and we need to kind of electrify our energy infrastructure. I think if we're going to face into the climate crisis, we definitely need to do that. I think, as with all things, there are choices. And I think one of the problems we have is, the reaching, as with housing, to some bargain basement solutions might lead to some infrastructure that we're going to be living with for 100 years or so. And I think one of the things that I hope this bill can address, but at the moment there's not, the picture isn't looking too rosy, is that a good example in our Derbyshire branch, a new spine of pylons that could go down the M1. It makes total sense to run that kind of infrastructure, but instead is proposed through the Erewash Valley, which currently has no infrastructure in it at all. It's kind of those choices that need to be made. So kind of undergrounding pylons in very special places. In Denmark, they're undergrounding all of their pylon electricity infrastructure. It is clearly a choice that you can make when we do need to put new infrastructure in, making sure where possible it runs along existing infrastructure and making sure it takes account of the value of landscapes and the countryside to people.
Well, one thing that the CPRE has mentioned is that the bill makes it easier for public bodies to make compulsory purchases of land, abolishing these hope values, as they're described, which takes into consideration what the land would be worth if it had planning permission on it. Now, some farming organisations are worried about that, but you wanted to see that change. Why?
I think we've long argued that hope value skews the market. And if we just go back to that point around, large developers squeezing out affordable and social rent homes on the grounds of viability, we need to find a formula whereby we can power a change in our housing market and a diversity of supply. And in order to do that, we think that, the kind of escalating of land values doesn't give you, and public bodies in particular, the flexibility to do that. Now, that doesn't mean that we think CPO should apply it everywhere. I don't think you should have compulsory purchase of farmland, of greenfields to create big estates. I think where we think it's particularly could be applied is on previously developed land, on brownfield sites, and also on, those rural exception sites, those sites at the edges of our villages where small numbers of homes to create affordable and social rent homes could be really critical for those rural communities.
Roger Mortlock from CPRE. Do let us know what you think on this or anything else you hear on the programme. You can email us at farming.today@bbc.co.uk. That's all from us. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Heather Simons. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.